All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here. Today, we're going to be talking about the 10 best decks currently right now in the metagame for this new season in Pokemon Pocket. Crimson Blaze released just a few days ago. I think a lot of people took a look at the set and thought, well, the metagame might not change very much. We had 6 weeks of the previous season. Now with this new set release, it does seem like things are completely different. The metagame right now is almost unrecognizable. One thing is for sure is that leading up to our big tournament this weekend, a lot of people are wondering what the best decks to play are. There have been a couple of tournaments, smaller tournaments over the last few days that have, kickstarted things a little bit, but the metagame is very much wide open right now. I'm going to share my opinions about, what's happening currently in the metagame, what's driving the meta, what's changing in the current metagame, and then I'm going to be, of course, giving you my 10 best decks that I would play right now. This list is likely going to change, especially given the results of our tournament this weekend, which, by the way, you got to go and register. We have $1,000, guys, $1,000 cash in the prize pool for our PMPT number 13 tournament, the first tournament of the new Crimson Blaze season. Link to register down in the description below. It's going to be absolutely massive. We have almost 600 people already signed up. Going to be a huge tournament, big results and big ramifications, in terms of which decks do well this weekend. So definitely go and register. By the way, as well, before we get into the deck lists, we're on the road to 50,000 subscribers. So if you're watching this video and you're not subscribed, I would heavily recommend doing it. I would love that. So, maybe you sub, maybe you don't. Anyway, let's dive into this. So these decks aren't in any order. That's the one thing here. I don't think it makes sense to rank anything until, the weekend rolls around and we get some of the, the results of the tournament. But 10 decks today, and I think they're all definitely pretty viable in this new metagame. So let's kick things off right now. 2-minute intro. We love it. Oh, by the way, there will be timestamps down in the description below if you want to navigate through this video more properly. And if you're curious about the energy types for these decks, it's also listed down in the timestamps. Okay. Man, no sponsor today, luckily, right? I mean, it was a long enough intro, I would say. But anyway, let's just do it. This video might be kind of long. We're covering 10 decks, but the first deck on today's video, deck number 1, again, they're not in any order, is going to be the new Aggro Whimsicott Ariados package here. This deck list is phenomenal. One of my favorites. What I love about this deck is how consistent it is with the new Quick Growth Extract. One of the random sort of, buffs to the grass type. It's just like a brand new archetype. Whimsicott was always like a pretty decent Pokemon, right? 140 HP. We can Leaf Cape it, bring it to 170. It does a decent amount of damage for 1 grass and 1 colorless. It's a stage 1 Pokemon. They kind of just gave Whimsicott everything it could possibly need to be a valuable archetype here. Quick Growth Extract paired with the new Ariados Trap Territory to increase your opponent's Pokemon's active Pokemon retreat cost, boosting the damage from Whimsicott's Grass Knot attack. Again, all stage 1 Pokemon, Quick Growth Extract. It's really consistent, really fast paced. And the cool thing here is that a lot of the new Pokemon in the metagame have high retreat costs. Things like Steelix, like Venusaur, etc. Even Charizard, I believe, right? So when you have double Ariados on the board, Whimsicott all of a sudden, is hitting for, 160, 130, 190, or whatever the damage thresholds are. It's 40 plus 30 more for each energy in their retreat cost, which, does add up pretty quickly. And this is only a deck playing, of course, to some stage or single prize Pokemon, but it's also playing mostly just 2 prize Pokemon. So theoretically speaking, the low energy attack cost means that your opponent will have to go through 2 Whimsicott EX, which is pretty relevant. The one thing about this deck list here is that we're not really playing anything for Oricorio other than just the Ariadoses, which, aren't really consistent options, I would say, to be able to deal with Oricorio, although they can deal with it somewhat well. But one thing is very interesting going into the season is that, Oricorio doesn't seem to me as that valuable as of a card as maybe it was sometime last season, right? Typically, Oricorio is really strong at the beginning of the season, but a lot of the decks that are seeing play right now are not EX archetypes. They actually are just sort of single prize Pokemon that are really powerful. They're all over the place. Things like Magnezone, like Helioisk, like Hydreigon. These are things that are kind of everywhere. So Oricorio is not something that I really put too much stock into right now. So, if you're playing a deck list and you don't really account for Oricorio, then it might not be like that big of a deal. And I find that to be very interesting. So other versions of Whimsicott here are playing things like, I believe they might be playing like Kartana, which is a pretty decent Pokemon to get through Oricorio just because it does 40 damage for 1 energy. So Kartana is a pretty good option here into Oricorio. You could also play things like Pheromosa, although traditionally Pheromosa is not that good into Oricorio. So there is a non-EX Whimsicott that does 50 for 1 energy. Not something I would really consider. I think Kartana is probably just a better option here. So that would be my recommendation if you did want to account for Oricorio a little bit more, is to play Kartana. But yeah, this is an example of just sort of a baseline deck that did well recently at an online tournament. So, you know, Whimsicott here to me does seem to be like in the top 10 early on this season, but it's not something I'm like overly confident in terms of being like a top tier deck. That's the thing, is like, I definitely think there's a couple clear standouts early on in the season, but at the end of the day, you know, we're talking about 10 decks. So we wanted to spread this video a little bit thin today. So shout out to Whimsicott and Ariados. I do like the deck. Double Sabrina with sort of this aggressive archetype here. I do like, you can trap Pokemon in the active spot as well with Ariados and Sabrina, which is cool. We have one May, one Iono, one Copycat double Pokeball, which is interesting, but we are playing double Quick Growth Extract, right? So refreshing our hand with things like Iono and Copycat is actually a little bit more useful than just playing, you know, I guess like extra like Maze or Pokemon Communications or things like that, because we're only playing 8 Pokemon. So you definitely just want to draw into Quick Growth Extract. Copycat and Iono make some sense. Copycat to me is interesting. You know, it really doesn't feel that good in this metagame other than going up against Suicune. And there are going to be some people playing Suicune, but Suicune's actually been struggling. So anyway, moving on, Whimsicott, Ariados, I love it, and I definitely would recommend it. And it's definitely in my top 10 decks currently in this early season. Next up is going to be Greninja and Mega Absol. So this is an archetype that, you know, people have been playing for quite some time here. Here's just an example of a, you know, kind of a different variant that has been performing well recently at a tournament. And I like it. So one thing that you're going to notice as well about the metagame right now and the decks that people are playing is a very significant absence of Chingling. So a lot of people have told me that they don't think Chingling is that good this season. Chingling was the #1 most played Pokemon last season. It was broken. The best decks were all playing Rare Candy. I personally think that most of the best decks right now are also playing Rare Candy. Like, they're, you know, it's still Hydreigon, Suicune, Greninja. These are still really relevant. In fact, this deck list specifically is literally playing Rare Candy. So I think that, you know, if Chingling doesn't see enough play early this season, then Rare Candy, high roll decks will just end up winning all of these tournaments because they are inherently the strongest decks in terms of their upside potential. This is a deck that I thought really kind of stormed in towards the end of last season, and there's really no reason not to play a deck list like this. We're not really playing any new cards, but it's still phenomenal. You know, the Absol Darkrai damage with Greninja. Now, instead of Chingling, we're just playing Tyrogue to be a bit more of an aggressive option. Tyrogue plus a Darkrai damage or a turn 2 Greninja ping is going to be able to KO other baby Pokemon and put a lot of pressure realistically on Oricorio, which is sort of the main core to this deck list, which can deal with Oricorio pretty well. It can deal with other baby Pokemon well. It's just kind of an aggressive, more high roll kind of control type deck, and I do like it. One Team Rocket Grunt is interesting here, but a lot of high energy attack cost Pokemon in the metagame right now. So Team Rocket Grunt, although not the most consistent card, does have some merit currently, but I do really like, you know, the whole Dark Greninja deck list, and it was sort of the deck I used towards the end of last ranked season to great success, and I think that will carry over. Honestly, Greninja is still one of the strongest cards in the game. In fact, I actually would recommend playing Hydreigon Greninja decks right now because not many people are playing Chingling. So if I wanted to move the meta forward, which I do, I would recommend people play Chingling. But realistically, I don't know if there's as much value in Chingling right now. So you might as well just play the cards that don't have to get countered by Chingling, which is, of course, things like Hydreigon and Greninja. So Greninja's going to be throughout this video a little bit. So is Hydreigon. Those are two just incredible Pokemon right now. Yeah, so instead of Chingling, we're playing Tyrogue, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more damage, but still, in my mind, a top tier deck with double Greninja, double Cyrus. It's a broken deck. This deck is crazy. We're also playing Rocky Helmet to increase damage. Again, it's kind of an oldie, updated a little bit to remove the Chinglings, but honestly, you know, maybe we just run Chingling. Like this weekend, I would not be surprised if Suicune, Greninja, or Hydreigon absolutely dominated, right? Because what we're seeing realistically as one of the more like significant progressions in this early season is sort of the dominance of Magnezone. The entire buffed like archetype of like that lightning type Magnezone stuff with Clement, with the new Magnemite, the new Magnezone, it's inherently broken. Like that is what a lot of people are doing right now to great success. So you know, realistically, I think that one of the best Pokemon in the game to beat Magnezone is Hydreigon. So that's kind of where we're at, to be honest. Is Hydreigon's kind of broken. A lot of Magnezone, not a lot of Chingling. You might as well play Hydreigon. We'll talk about it later, but for right now, I do think Greninja and Mega Absol are very, very good. Next up is going to be Steelix Oricorio. So I was just talking down about Oricorio a little bit, but you know, the data right now is showing that this Steelix deck is actually probably the best way to play an Oricorio deck. Magnezone Oricorio has been struggling. In fact, if you take a look at the overall metadata since the beginning of the season, this Steelix Oricorio deck is actually the highest win rate deck in the game right now, and I find that to be interesting. I think it's taking advantage of a lot of decks that maybe don't do very well into Oricorio, things like Charizard, but at the same time, having this like Mega Steelix to be able to basically wall like anything that's kind of coming in here that would be good into Oricorio. Now, I don't know if this deck's going to be that good into Hydreigon, but into most other things, I actually do like it. In Mega Steelix can deal with Suicune fairly easily as well. So the thing about Mega Steelix here is that it's fairly slow in general. Most decks are playing Heavy Helmet. Some people commented on the video that I posted yesterday highlighting this deck list, asking why don't we play the Metal Apron or the Steel Apron to be immune to status conditions. I don't think that status conditions are really that big of a factor. I mean, Venusaur is floating around a little bit, but in tournaments, it's not that popular. I would say like Lopunny, Mega Lopunny is like maybe the #1 example of that. So maybe Steel Apron is worth it if you're seeing a lot of Mega Lopunny, but at the end of the day, I think that Steelix is actually quite strong. And when you're playing Pichu and double Brock, this deck list is a lot quicker than you might think. You have the potential to go turn 2 Mega Steelix and attack, but turn 3 is actually pretty consistent, and we are utilizing one Sabrina, one Cyrus, one Copycat, and a new Serena here. The cool thing about Onyx is it's also just one hit KOing Oricorios, and Heavy Helmet does work with Onyx, whereas like the Steel Apron, of course, is not going to work with Onyx if you're playing that. So this is not a bad deck list. It's a slow deck. Like if we were in the middle of like ranked battles right now, I don't know if I would recommend playing this particular deck, but you know, when you're in tournaments and there's a match timer, and again, most people early in the season aren't really accounting for Oricorio, this is probably one of the better examples of that. And I do compare this deck to the Mega Absol Oricorio deck of last season, which you know, was very, very good at the beginning, but like after the first or second week, it completely fell off in play. We're likely going to see the same thing here with Mega Steelix, but for right now, this is kind of the only way that I would recommend playing Mega Steelix. And again, might not be sort of in line with the type of deck that most people want to play, but the results don't lie. The average win rate for this deck, at least early on in the season, has been phenomenal. So something I definitely have to recommend in our top 10 decks. So again, go watch yesterday's video if you want to see like a full showcase for this deck, because I've already talked about it in great detail. Shout out to Meta of Steel, who went 7-1 at a tournament last night with this deck. Very, very cool. The meta is changing so quick. Again, like a lot of these decks that are, you know, vying for viability in the metagame in this first few days are probably not really going to exist in a week or two, you know, because things really become condensed quickly in the metagame. But yeah, the amount of like parity and variety in this early season is actually kind of staggering. It's really difficult. It's difficult for me to get like a real read on what's happening. There are some trends that I can definitely recognize, but things are really spread out and really all over the place. Nobody knows really what to do. So I think the results of our tournament this weekend are likely going to define how people interpret, you know, what's good and not good in the metagame. You know what I mean? So anyway, Mega Steelix, definitely interesting. It's polarizing, but its win rate is really high. So, you know, we're going to include it in today's video. Let's talk about Suicune Greninja, because it's still around. It's still around, and you know, one of the things that would really slow down Suicune and Greninja previously was Chingling. You know, you were able to kind of utilize Chingling in like Altaria or the Absol Greninja deck, and it was, you know, sort of a specific card that you'd pair in other decks that, you know, really helped you in the Suicune matchup. You'd pair it with like Red Card or Mars, and you would really keep Suicune in check, bring them down to maybe 1 prize card, or, you know, they take 2 prizes, then you Mars them to 1, and then come in and then KO Suicune, and then, you know, and then you go from there. I still think Suicune Greninja is definitely good. But the thing is, you know, if you look at the metagame, it's kind of all lightning. Like there's a lot of lightning floating around because all of the lightning stuff got buffed so heavily. I've never seen a lower win rate for Suicune Greninja than I have so far right now at the beginning of the season. It's actually been struggling pretty tremendously. And I'm kind of waiting to see some of the matchup data as to how Suicune performs into things like Charizard, into things like Venusaur, into things like Steelix or Mega Lopunny. These are all things I'm very interested in because last season was very much built around counterplaying Suicune Greninja, and I think the beginning of this season, you know, a lot of the decks people are playing just happen to be good into it. So I do think that it's worth mentioning in our top 10 decks, like in right now in today's video, but I do not feel nearly as confident in Suicune and Greninja as I did, you know, maybe mid or even late last season. So that's an interesting progression as well. Maybe, you know, the deck gets adjusted, maybe things change. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But at the end of the day, we all know that this is a strong deck list. Every deck's playing Copycat, including this deck. So, you know, it's less valuable to be playing things like Suicune, but at the end of the day, you know, it's Suicune Greninja. And again, there's not that much Chingling right now. So that is another thing that's not necessarily holding Suicune Greninja back that was very prominent at, you know, last season. Like I said, last season, Chingling was literally the #1 most played Pokemon in the entire metagame. So, you know, without Chingling, I feel a little bit, scared of things like Hydreigon and Greninja, honestly. But yeah, that's all I have to say about it. Nothing's really changed here, at least yet. And its win rate is not nearly as high as you might imagine, which is, interesting, right, for Suicune and Greninja. But that's a trend. And I kind of attribute that to a lot of the more aggressive Lightning type decks, because, Lightning last season really was Magnezone or Oricorio, which was specifically good into like Altaria and had like a 50-50 into Suicune and Greninja, but lost to Hydreigon. Now, there's a lot of these like aggressive Lightning decks, like Jolteon's kind of popping off. Spoiler, we might be talking about Jolteon. There's the new Magnezone like Helioisk deck. So there's a lot more like fast-paced aggressive ways to play Lightning right now that don't even play Oricorio. And those decks are specifically likely going to be a lot better into Suicune and Greninja. So maybe that's a reason why its win rate's been down so much. But yeah, I mean, if Suicune and Greninja won our tournament tomorrow or Sunday, I would not be like surprised. You know what I mean? So that's why it's got to be in our top 10 decks today, but we'll see how it performs this weekend. I think that's really going to be the big marker. That's how we're going to judge things, especially with no ranked right now. The tournament meta is the meta. That's the only thing we have to really, review and analyze. So next up, though, is going to be Charizard. Yeah, I think not everybody's that confident in Charizard, like, truthfully. The thing about this deck list here is that we're actually only playing one Mega Charizard and then one a classic Genetic Apex Charizard. And I think that does make some sense, mainly just because, like, if your opponent does play bench damage and they can bring up Mega Charizard and then KO it, then the game's kind of over. You know what I mean? And against single prize archetypes, it's a little bit more sketchy, right? So that's why I don't necessarily think that Mega Charizard is that great. However, the new Charmeleon stuff with Flame Patch and Entei is in general pretty strong. Like, it's not that bad. We're playing Heavy Helmet, one Heavy Helmet in the deck, which I find to be hilarious, considering that Mega Charizard, Entei, and Charizard EX here only have 2 energies in their retreat cost. So I don't really know the idea there, but I guess it's mainly for the non-EX Charizard so that we can maybe reduce the damage done to it a little bit. I don't know. All I know is that this is an example of a deck that I pulled from the tournament today, and the highest placing Charizard right now. Charizard's win rate's been pretty low. So out of all of the decks in this video, I think Charizard is likely struggling the most. And again, I don't know if there's really a lot of reasons to play Charizard right now compared to so many other decks in the metagame. I know Mega Charizard seems fun, but the meta right now isn't dominated by other Mega Pokemon. Like, the entire metagame right now is defined by these non-EX Pokemon like Hydreigon, like Magnezone, like Oricorio, that are kind of just dominating. Greninja is another example of that. So at the end of the day, Mega Charizard has a place in the metagame. It just might not be that relevant right now, with most decks seeing play that aren't even playing Mega Pokemon. In fact, a lot of decks aren't even playing EX Pokemon. Mega Charizard specifically is sort of a card that just kind of beat other 3-prize Mega Pokemon. But if you're not playing any 3-prize Pokemon, like, why play Mega Charizard, right? That's really what it comes down to. So, Magnezone is everywhere. Hydreigon is everywhere. Like, these are things I just probably would not want to play if I'm playing Mega Charizard, because, in order to attack, you take a big toll. You take 50 damage. If you have to attack 3 times to win the game with Mega Charizard, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be a good card. The whole idea of Mega Charizard is to win the game in a single attack. So against other Mega Pokemon, it does make sense. I think that's why 1 copy of Charizard in this deck makes sense. In fact, we're playing 3 total Charizards, a 1-prizer, a 2-prizer, and a 3-prizer. Like, why not? That's the funny thing here. But I do think Charmeleon is strong. I do. It's just sort of the Charizard stuff is awkward. That's the reality of it. The non-EX Charizard, this new one here with Inferno Onrush, like, is 1-hit KOing a Magnezone, which is pretty cool. It's also 1-hit KOing Hydreigon. So if you're able to maybe go, Entei, or, Entei into Charizard EX, or maybe you just sort of immediately go into non-EX Charizard and then end the game with Charizard EX or Mega, I don't know. But either way, it's going to be interesting. What I find interesting is actually how similar the card art is for Mega Charizard and then the original Charizard EX. They're like the exact same card. They probably did that on purpose, also because they're very similar Pokemon in their own right. Yeah, to be honest, I think Entei kind of carries this deck. I'm not going to lie. Like, the draw power of Entei and then the ability to kind of power it up with Charmeleon does allow you to deal some pretty significant damage, honestly. But yeah, again, maybe it just takes some time for us to really figure out Charizard. I'm really not that confident in it, but we're covering 10 decks in today's video. So, honestly, I would kind of still put Charizard in that top 10 currently in the metagame, but my confidence in it is not nearly as high as probably like every other deck in this list. So keep that in mind. Next up, though, gonna be one of the more interesting things. So this is Mega Lopunny. And, Mega Lopunny to me I think is capitalizing on a particular meta trend that is really dominating currently in this early season, which is, you know, the lightning decks being everywhere. Mega Lopunny here paired with Fighting Coach Lucario and Hitmontop is going to allow us to kind of deal with these lightning type decks really well and deal with Oricorio pretty easily. And like I said, Oricorio wasn't even seeing that much play. A lot of the lightning decks are non-Oricorio, like fast-paced, aggressive decks. So Lopunny here is sort of pretty well positioned in a weird way. And Lopunny is not something to be slept on. Like, the confusion effect for Lopunny is kind of ridiculous. It's a 50-50 chance to just not get attacked. Like, it's the same thing as Magnezone, but we have 190 HP and we can hit for up to 180. And it's kind of nuts. So like, even if on average we're dealing, you know, 90 damage, which isn't that much, the confusion kind of makes Mega Lopunny worth it, plus hitting for weakness on all of these lightning type Pokemon. You add in Fighting Coach Lucario, all of a sudden that 90 becomes 110. A second Lucario, you know, does bring that up to, 130 damage with weakness. All of a sudden we're one at KOing Magnezones, which are everywhere, right? So one copy of May, one copycat double research here. We are kind of looking to just draw through our deck as quickly as possible. Low energy attack costs across the board. One Cyrus and Hitmontop, so Hitmontop being able to deal some chip damage to the active, which again can be boosted by Lucario, but at the same time is dealing some chip damage to the bench to then bring something up with Cyrus. This is a deck list that kind of has it all going for it, and I honestly think that a lot of people kind of slept on Mega Lopunny. This is exciting to me because this is the first time. This is by far the best fighting deck we've had in so long. I can't even remember the last time a fighting type deck was this relevant in the metagame. And again, that might be because these lightning Magnezone type decks are everywhere, and it might be like a very specific anti-meta call right now. The positioning and the quality of its placement in this early season is very much the opposite of Suicune, and I find that to be pretty funny. So, you know, Lopunny definitely has a position here, and it can hold its own against non-lightning type decks. Again, with the confusion, with the coin flips, it's a bit of an RNG deck list, but you know what? RNG does win tournaments, and that's sort of what it's all about here. So, you know, shout out to Mega Lopunny. Like, honestly, it's really not that bad of a deck. It's a deck that I'm actually pretty high on. I do think the best way to pair Mega Lopunny is either playing Hitmonchan, which I'm not very high on, or pairing it with only other single prize archetypes like Hitmontop and Lucario. That way you can go maybe 1-1-3 prize trade. It's honestly, it's a strong card. Lopunny is definitely underrated right now. In fact, I would probably kind of squeeze it into my top 5. Its win rates over the last, you know, couple of days in these tournaments have been really high. Again, it's capitalizing on all these lightning type decks that are seeing play. So, you know, maybe, you know, week 2, week 3, you know, maybe Lopunny falls off and it's not that relevant, but if lightning becomes sort of a top tier archetype, then at least we do have a pretty significant fighting type Pokemon that can hold its own in the metagame, right? And that's not something that we've had for quite some time, which is kind of funny. But yeah, man, I mean, I like Mega Lopunny. I really do. There's a lot of ways to play it, I think, but this is sort of the generic way that most people are playing it. And again, you don't get shut down by Oricorio at all. And yeah, it's definitely a bit of a high roll strategy. It's not the most consistent deck in the world, but it is powerful, and I had to recommend it. Next up is going to be Magnezone. This is Dark Magnezone, which has been making a return. Again, very good win rates recently. The cool thing about Magnemite here is that we can now kind of play this in a Lycia package, and this is not to be underrated. This deck is playing 1 Chingling, 1 Tyrogue. And again, Chingling to me is definitely underrated right now. There's a lot of rare candy between Hydreigon and a lot of things like Greninja. So at the end of the day, Magnezone is broken. This new Magnezone is very, very good. You know, we still have Magneton. We have Clement, which can search our deck for the Magnetons. We have, you know, the new Magnemites, which are not only able to KO if you are playing Lightning Energies. This deck is playing only Dark Energies. It can KO baby Pokemon. We have Lycia to search for the Magnemites, as well as grabbing things like Chingling. So this is a package that I've sort of tested a bunch on our live stream last night randomly. It's sort of the Magnemite Magnezone package with Chingling and Lycia. And I think that you can basically pair those that whole package with anything in the entire game, because with Magnezone, you don't have to play Lightning Energies. You can pair the Magnezone package with anything. Chingling, you can pair with anything, and now we can search Chingling and Magnemite with Lycia. So why would we not just sort of play Magnezone, Lycia, Chingling in like any and all of these deck lists? You also got to keep in mind that Magnezone is not something that loves Hydreigon traditionally. So, you know, Chingling there is really good into, of course, Hydreigon. So to me, it just makes a lot of sense. And I do think Hydreigon will kind of present itself as sort of the #1 player early on this season, just because Chingling isn't very popular. So this is something, do not sleep on this. You know, you can, of course, lead Darkrai or Mega Absol, and that's not super ideal. In fact, I could even see this archetype just cutting Mega Absol out of it entirely, although, you know, Absol is going to be a good game finisher. That's where it sort of relies on. So this is a deck that definitely does not want to lead off with Darkrai or Mega Absol in most scenarios, but if you lead Magnemite, whatever, and if you lead Chingling or Tyrogue, great, because then we can set up our Magnezones on the back end. Don't underestimate Double Lissia. It's very, very consistent. 4 basic Pokemon in the deck with under 50 HP. Clement to go ahead and search out our Magnetons, 1 Copycat, double Research, even a Giant Cape and a red card here, and 1 Pokeball as well, and 1 Cyrus. I really do love this deck. This is something that I would not underestimate, and theoretically you could play this exact same Magnezone, Lissia, Chingling package with a lot of things other than Absol and Darkrai, right? Because the energy type doesn't matter. I was playing this exact deck basically, but instead of Darkrai, Mega Absol, I was actually playing Mega Pinsir and Grass Energies, and I was kind of stomping people. It's actually pretty strong. So keep in mind, this new Magnezone is a buff, but the Magnemite is a buff, and I think it pairs really well with Lissia and Chingling. So there's a lot of opportunities here, but we're going to see a lot of Magnezone this season. We're going to see a ton of Magnezone because this new Mirror Shot Mag is inherently broken. Like 90 damage, 150 HP, it can set itself up, and it's 50-50 chance to just not get attacked on your opponent's next turn, which is just inherently ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. And some aggro potential here, basically, because we're playing Dark Energies, the only Pokemon we ever want to attach to manually are either Darkrai or Mega Absol, right? We would attach to Absol to kind of set it up as our final attacking option, or same with Darkrai, we'll deal an extra 20 damage to the active every turn. And paired with things like Chingling and Tyrogue, it's actually fairly aggressive, especially when they have to go through a Magnezone after that baby Pokemon, and then also deal with Darkrai or Mega Absol on the back end. This deck is broken. This is very similar to the Greninja deck, which is playing, Darkrai and Mega Absol. So it's the same thing, but instead of Magnezone, we're playing, instead of Greninja and rare candies and stuff, we're just playing the Magnezone package. So that's the whole idea here. The Greninja package you can throw with anything. The Magnezone package you could throw into anything. They really are sort of the two engines that we're probably going to just see all over the place this season. The thing is, though, Magnezone does not get shut down by Chingling, whereas Greninja and Hydreigon do. So keep that in mind. I love this deck. I think it's absolutely broken. If Ranked was out right now, this is likely the deck that I would probably try to play, or the Pinsir version. I love Pinsir. It's not in this video, but if you want to go see it, check out our live stream VOD from last night. Next up is going to be what I call Magro. So this is Aggro Magnezone. This is sort of, again, just the new version of Magnezone that you can play, which is with the new Helioisk and Clement's backpack. Basically here, just utilizing the energy battery that is Magneton and utilizing Clement to search for Magneton and Helioisk to be a little bit more consistent. And, Helioisk hits for 120. So this is a deck that is very aggressive and going to be very good into Suicune and Greninja. Clement's backpack is going to increase the damage of Helioisk. And then, of course, on the backline, we have Magnezone. So we're basically just playing all single prize lightning Pokemon that hit for big damage, and that's really relevant. And we're also playing one Oricorio because why not, I guess, right? Sometimes Oricorio is going to win you games, so maybe just playing one Oricorio is worth it. But yeah, Aggro Magnezone, or what I call Magro, is a legitimate archetype. Now, I do think that this is a little bit of like a meme, because if I were to play, if I'm going to choose to play an aggressive lightning type deck, I really think Jolteon kind of fits that bill a little bit better, personally. I think Jolteon's just a more effective, aggressive lightning type deck. Yeah, you can play Magnezone in this new way, and this is a deck that has been performing fairly well in online tournaments over the last couple of days, and this new Magnezone is inherently broken. So that's the cool thing about Magnezone, is that there are other strong lightning type Pokemon we can pair with it, even though Magnezone is traditionally something that you would kind of pair with whatever. These lightning type archetypes are pretty cool. So Magnezone now can be played with Oricorio, it can be played with Lissia and Chingling and pair it with anything, or you can play it with Helioisk. So it's cool. I think there's a lot of different ways to play Magnezone. It continues to be one of the most flexible Pokemon in the entire game, and this is a very, very fast-paced, aggressive deck. You're going to do well into Suicune, as well as other I would say, single-prize archetypes, right? So anything that's playing multi-prize Pokemon that Helioisk can KO, I think this is definitely pretty valuable. Suicune seems to be sort of the #1 example there. But honestly, I would say that if I'm not playing Aggro Magnezone, honestly, my choice is probably going to be Jolteon, because I think Jolteon is broken. Right now, at least. I do think Jolteon is good. Jolteon traditionally is something that's good into Hydreigon, right? Because Hydreigon, in the face of Jolteon, takes 60 damage when it uses its ability, or 40 or whatever. And that's a big deal. Jolteon as well, just really aggressive, really fast-paced with Zero Aura, with Elemental Switch. We're oftentimes attacking on our second turn, and we have Cyrus to control the bench damage if they attach to their bench. very aggressive, very good actually into Suicune, but it's going to be good into a lot of other stuff currently in the metagame. Magnezone is something that also kind of gets shut down by Jolteon, right? Because, you know, if you're using Magneton's ability, you're sprinkling damage all over your own board and then targeting your opponent to bring you up with these two Cyruses. So, you know, I really like Jolteon right now. It's actually one of the better performing decks currently in the metagame, and a big reason for that excuse me, is just it's matchups into like a lot of the things that are common, right? So, you know, if you're seeing a bunch of Hydreigon, if you're seeing a bunch of Suicune Greninja, if you're seeing a bunch of Magnezone, I would say Jolteon's probably going to be a pretty good choice for you, and it has been performing very admirably. So I love Jolteon right now. I think it's very well positioned. Nothing really changed here other than its positioning in the metagame because of the new cards. Charizard is another example of that. You know, Ivysaur, like there's so many Pokemon that are just buffing themselves up with energies, and the more energies that are getting spread throughout your opponent's board, the more damage we're doing with Jolteon, and that's the big strength here of Jolteon, is it can kind of get around those decks that like to kind of just, you know, set up a benched Pokemon. When Jolteon's in the active spot, they can't really do that. If they attach to it, they take damage. We bring them up with Cyrus and we KO them, right? So it's a very fun strategy, and definitely an interesting one. And then, of course, Zeraora to get around Oricorios. Yeah, I mean, I got nothing else to say about Jolteon, right? It's a classic, kind of a consummate like tier 2 deck last season, but right now it really is sort of emerging as one of those top tier options. So I would put Jolteon right now as top 5 for sure in my mind. It's been performing very, very well. You'll notice that there's a lot of different varieties of decks right now, a lot of lightning type stuff, but there's so many different decks that are pretty viable currently, and that's very interesting. I'm very curious to see the results of, you know, today's or tomorrow's tournament. It's going to be crazy. I mean, like, I don't think we've ever been this wide open at the beginning of a season. It really is kind of crazy. Lastly is probably going to be my #1 deck right now, coincidentally, and that is Hydreigon, guys. I mean, listen, nobody's playing Chingling. Chingling is not very common right now. Hydreigon deals very, very well with most things currently in the metagame. You know, Charizard's popular. Hydreigon does not care. It's all single prize Pokemon. Absolutely broken. So shout out to Hydreigon. It does well into Magnezone. It's high roll, so it can be basically anything anyway. And like I said, there's no Chinglings out there to kind of slow Hydreigon down. So, you know, at the end of the day, this deck is inherently broken. We're playing the Indeedee package here with Giant Capes to keep Hydreigon alive even longer. Just ridiculous. I mean, what are we doing? Like last season, Hydreigon almost ran away with things. It really wasn't until, you know, we started to throw Chingling and like Greninja in every deck that we were able to really kind of slow down Hydreigon. But at the moment right now, there's just not a lot of that happening. So why not play Hydreigon? I would not be surprised at all if Hydreigon completely ran away with the tournament this weekend, just because I don't think a lot of people are necessarily respecting it enough. It is the high roll king. This is inherently one of the strongest Pokemon we've ever had. I mean, it's literally a rare candy turn 2 130. It's crazy. This is an insane card. And we need to respect Hydreigon. And really one of the only ways to counter it is to stop those rare candies with Chingling. And they are still playing Zweilos. Keep that in mind. They're still playing Zweilos. So, you know, there's a few things in the metagame that are good into Hydreigon. I just mentioned, you know, Chingling, of course, but there's also Jolteon. Some of the grass decks might be able to deal with this pretty well. Maybe like a high roll Greninja type deck can kind of ping the bench and bring up a Hydreigon. There are some options, but the most common play decks right now, and Hydreigon also does not care about Oricorio. So, you know, it's one of those things where you have to respect it, you have to counterplay it, you have to account for it, because if not, you know, all of these Hydreigons are just going to high roll you, and they're probably just going to sweep through your deck. So, you know, I don't have anything else to really say about Hydreigon because it hasn't changed. It's just the same old high roll Hydreigon that we saw last season, except now, you know, now it's just wide open. There's nothing stopping it. And that does terrify me a little bit. So my recommendation, if you're going to play in our $1,000 tournament this weekend, to keep Hydreigon on the top of your mind. Trust me, I know people are disrespecting Chingling, but believe me, if nobody's playing Chingling, Hydreigon will dominate you. So probably just play Chingling. I'm not going to lie. Especially if you're playing Magneton or Magnezone. I think it's just worth it to play Chingling so that you have at least some couple of turns. Because if they go turn 2 rare candy on you, the game is over. You're not going to recover from that. So you have to slow down Hydreigon. And believe me, they do it way more often than you might think. Somehow this deck list is way more consistent than you would ever imagine. But yeah, man, you know, it's Hydreigon. And I do have it at the end of this list specifically. Again, I told you this list wasn't in order, but to be fair, if this was in order, Hydreigon would be #1 right now. So that's my recommendation. Again, none of these decks were in any sort of order, but I do think Hydreigon's sort of the top dog right now. I think everything in this video is very, very good. These 10 decks, half of them might be completely completely irrelevant a week, 2 weeks from now. We don't know. All we have is sort of our early, data, the early sort of meta, results, and that's really what we're basing this video off of. I looked at, positioning in the metagame. I looked at popularity of decks. I looked at win rates. I looked at performances and results in the last couple of tournaments to start the season. So this is all definitely my assumptions. I could be totally wrong about all this stuff, but I typically just use a data-driven approach. So it's kind of all of the information that we have right now, and hopefully it works best for you guys. So that's the video today. The 10 best decks currently in Pokemon Pocket. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, guys, we're on the road to 50,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to register for PMPT 13 this weekend. $1,000 in the prize pool. If you want to know how to register, if you want to learn more, then join the Discord link down in the description below, and all of our information will be there in the Discord. So anyway, guys, there it is. There it is. That's my 10 decks, top 10 decks right now. We'll do our tier list next week after Meta Monday, and we'll break all things down after we get the tournament results. For right now, we're a little bit in the dark, and I had to do some digging. You know what I mean? I had to do some journalistic research to figure out what I would recommend. But yeah, this is where we're at. Comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Anything that we missed in this video, anything that you're playing that you think should have been mentioned. Comment down below. I would love to hear it. All right, guys, let's get out of here. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. Bye.